Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Wellness Coach on Blog Talk Radio. I'm your host, Edie Summers. The Wellness Coach is your oasis to slow down, tune in, and reboot. Find us on the web at portlandwellnesscoach.com. Today, I'm going to be talking about how I rebounded from brain fog and chronic fatigue and even what's known as ME and CFS. And I know these are really big topics, but these are questions I get asked all the time. And I actually have a book out on the subject. It's called The Memory of Health. You can find that on all the usual channels, including Lulu and Amazon. And so today, since I actually have no guest today, it's just me. I'm going to be talking about how I rebounded from ME, CFS, and brain fog and chronic fatigue. Again, these are questions I get asked all the time. So listen in for many of the tactics that I used to rebound. And if you want to read more in depth about what worked for me, you can check out my book, of course, which is called The Memory of Health, and also click on this link. You can click on it on the show page. It's portlandwellnesscoach.com/energy. That's a pretty link, so it's easy to remember. So that's where I have all of this written out, at least the highlights. And again, if you want to see in very great depth, I spent 10 years writing a book called The Memory of Health, which goes over about, I would say, 100 different possible causes of chronic fatigue, including chronic fatigue syndrome, and I address brain fog and a lot of the topics I'm talking about today and go into great depth in my book. But I wanted to give you some of the highlights because, again, these are issues that so many people struggle with, and these are the questions that I get asked over and over again is, how did you recover, and so I don't like to use the term recover. I like to use the term rebound, or sometimes I use the term positive recovery. And I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome in 2005, although I actually developed symptoms back in 1992 after I had a ski accident. And I had surgery, and then I was taking a lot of prescription painkillers as well as anti-inflammatories. I went into physical therapy, and somewhere in the process of all of that, whether it was the surgery or all of the prescription drugs, it's hard to say what it was, but my body all of a sudden changed, and I got really tired, and I went from someone who had a lot of energy to someone who was sleeping like 10 to 12 hours a day. Now, you could say that part of that was just my body recovering, which makes sense, but the problem is that it continued. And so this is a really, long story, and I'm not going to go into too many of the details here. I really want to get to what worked for me. But, I actually was an English major at the time, and I actually switched careers afterwards, and I was looking for answers. So since I couldn't tolerate prescription drugs, I realized I was having all sorts of side effects, and I'm not knocking prescription drugs or modern medicine or anything. I think that different things work for different people, and what I have found a lot of times is that it's a combination of things that work for people, but I had to start finding answers, and so I turned to the natural foods industry, actually based on the fact that I went to see a naturopath because I was having so many symptoms, and I was in physical therapy. And when you have scar tissue, I had knee surgery because I broke my knee after skiing, and my knee was like completely straight, and there was so much scar tissue that I was in physical therapy trying to get my knee down to even 90 degrees. And, this is from someone who, I was actually a modern dance major at the time, and then I switched to English after that. But, this was very frightening for me to, contemplate a future without having full use of my knee. So I was taking they had me on a bunch of ibuprofen, and they actually then switched me to naproxen, which is a prescription anti-inflammatory, which you can actually now find over the counter as what's called Aleve. And I actually started having really bad symptoms, like even worse symptoms than just fatigue and inflammation, and the inability to actually make any further progress on getting my knee reducing more scar tissue. So I went to see a naturopath, and he recommended that I take certain supplements and also like an arnica gel that he actually created for me himself. And the bottom line is that I started seeing improvements. And then, of course, I took myself off all of the anti-inflammatories, both prescription and just over-the-counter, like ibuprofen, because I was having so many reactions to them. So I just intuitively took myself off of them, and I started seeking answers, because for me, I had the vision in my mind of getting better, and I was looking for solutions. And so that vision pulled me through, and going to the naturopath was the first step. And that's how I discovered the world of the natural foods industry, and I started working in the supplements department of a health food store. And because I'd had such great success, and I actually was able to, I guess you could say, graduate from physical therapy, and I got my knee almost back all the way in terms of full range of motion. And then, I realized that I was onto something, that these natural alternatives had worked for me. And now again, I'm a huge proponent of integrative health, so I believe that you can find the best of both worlds, both in integrative health, both in modern medicine and alternative medicine, and a lot of times it's sort of finding the things that work for you on both sides, and it's often many things that work for people, although I have discovered recently that I do believe that one of the underlying potential root causes, and this isn't saying this is for everybody, because sometimes there are genetic factors also at play, especially if you're talking about ME and CFS, although keep in mind that only about 2% of all conditions are completely, that you can relate only completely to genetics, or you can only blame on genetics. Most conditions that we experience, including brain fog and chronic fatigue, and even chronic conditions, we have much more control over than we realize. And this is what's known as lifestyle medicine. It's also known as epigenetics. So anything that you can do above and beyond your genetics is within your reach and control. And I'm going to talk about some of these things today that I did. And, so for me, discovering the natural foods industry and discovering alternative health was the first piece of the puzzle, and then there were other pieces of the puzzle as well. And one of them, actually, that I'm exploring right now that I do believe might be related to one of the root causes is how the unconscious brain responds to stress. And this is actually Ashok Gupta's program. I'm actually doing this right now as part of the Chronic Illness Bloggers Network. And so I'm in his program, and I have to tell you that I think he's onto something. For me personally, I was able to get to about, I would say my body goes from, I've been through this twice, and it's a long story. I'm not going to go into the details of my personal story. You can read that in my book if you want to. I had two, I would say, major bouts with chronic fatigue syndrome, and then I've also dealt with burnout a few times, being in grad school and just working for a startup, and I've had my moments as well with sort of just my body just kind of breaking down, but I've been able to, the first round after my ski accident, I started working in the natural foods industry. I was able to get my energy back to about 90%, which is really good, sometimes even 95%. And then I had another crash, and pretty serious crash after a really stressful marriage in my 30s. And that time it was much harder for me to rebound. And you could contribute some of that to age, potentially. A lot of people start developing, actually I notice a lot of people, young people actually these days, which also kind of points to the fact that we have such a stressful world that we're living in. A lot of young people are developing not only chronic conditions in general, but also things that are more related to, say, the immune system, including allergies and asthma, but also chronic fatigue. I notice a lot of young people. But, the second time around, my body really crashed hard around the age of 35, and sometimes there are different reasons that our body crashes or why we develop symptoms. And again, I won't go into that here. You can check out my book or do your own research. It can be related to hormones. It can be related to stress. But one of the underlying factors I have started to notice is that there is potentially, we all have several factors that can contribute, and it's really important for you to kind of be a health detective and sort of see if you can figure out what might be some of the contributing factors for you. But I do believe that the way the unconscious brain responds to stress is potentially a big factor, and so I highly recommend the Gupta program if you feel that might be a contributing factor for you. And I'm going to go into that a little more detail here, but just really quickly, the second time around, I was able to get my body back to about 80-85%, and so I'm going to go over some of the tactics that have worked for me in general, and of course the whole, you never want to burn out in the first place, and I am covering here several different types of conditions that people experience, both burnout, having chronic fatigue, which can have many, many sources, and you really want to first check with a practitioner and get tested and make sure that you're ruling out, since there are so many causes of chronic fatigue. It could be anemia, it could be hypothyroidism, it could be chronic fatigue syndrome, it could be having treatment for cancer, it could be severe stress, it could be a combination of things. There are so many things that cause chronic fatigue that you really want to get your blood work done and kind of, again, be a health detective. But I'm covering several topics today, so keep in mind that some of these may relate to you and some of these may relate to other people. But I'm covering chronic fatigue, brain fog, kind of burnout, as well as ME and CFS. I personally have dealt with all of these, so I just want to give you some general tips in case any of this works for you. And again, if you want to go into major depth, and I did write a book on this subject. It's called The Memory of Health. It took me 10 years to write, and I just paced myself with it, and it's really designed to be a resource for not only living well, but if you have any type of chronic fatigue or any type of chronic condition, or you're interested in living a healthy lifestyle, or interested in well-being and what that might look like in terms of approaching it from an integrative way, sort of a holistic way, and approaching it in terms of mind, body, and spirit even. You can check out my book. It's called The Memory of Health. You can find it on Lulu and Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and also to listen more, to read more about this specific podcast. In addition to the book, which goes into a lot of detail, it's a huge book, and there are a lot of resources in it, and it covers a lot of different theories of chronic fatigue, as well as many, many different tactics in terms of getting better. If you want kind of a short version, you can check out this pretty link that is going to be, it's a companion to this podcast. You want to type in portlandwellnesscoach.com//energy. So now you're going to have to type in HTTP first. So here, let me get back over to the show page so I can read you the exact link. It's http://portlandwellnesscoach.com/energy. And this blog post is a companion to the podcast that you're listening to today. Okay? So, and also come join us on Facebook for even more support. I've got a couple pages on there. One of our biggest communities is Chronic Fatigue Support. So you can come join us on there as well. Again, that's Chronic Fatigue Support on Facebook. So let me just go over some of the main things that worked for me. And I have to keep it short today because I have a time limit, but I want to just share any of these in case they help you. So, and again, I'm kind of just reading this off of my blog. So again, you can check out the blog if you want to go into further, read further. And again, that's portlandwellnesscoach.com/energy. So mindfulness. So a big component for me, in addition to finding high quality food and supplements that the natural foods industry so beautifully developed and supplies for the world, which made a huge, huge difference for me. My body's very sensitive, and along the lines of, like in terms of eating real and fresh food and taking supplements that might suit your current situation. I have found that focusing on fresh organic food and non-GMO food as much as possible, taking key supplements, has really made a difference for me. And I'll go into that just a little bit more here, but that's one part of it. And then another part was what's called mindfulness. And that's really, so mindfulness is a practice of being in the present moment, and I would add with great joy, and also not judging your situation or being attached to the outcome. And there's a lot I could say about mindfulness, but mindfulness in terms of well-being and health and well-being for me, long before I learned what the term was or even realized what I was doing, I was paying attention to my symptoms, and I was minimizing what would exacerbate my symptoms, and I was emphasizing practices. Again, this is called lifestyle medicine, things that you can do that are in your control. I was emphasizing behaviors and health habits that were minimizing my symptoms and kind of making me feel better. So again, in a nutshell, I was using mindfulness or just being aware. I was listening to my body's voice on a very, very deep level, and I was paying attention to what was irritating it, and that could be foods, it could be situations, it could be people, it could be thoughts, which again kind of ties into the stress response, kind of like how our stress response is built in our body. And again, this is a long conversation. There's only so much I can cover today. There's so many topics that are so relevant to getting well and staying well, and in terms of really anything and any type of chronic condition, many, many huge topics. And you can listen to more of my podcast too. I interview some amazing experts, and we go into great depth about the mind-body connection, for instance, and how that can really impact health and well-being, and kind of also how like the stress response system is designed to keep you safe, but it can also get into what's called kind of like overdrive, and it can kind of get stuck in fight or flight. And we have to use mindfulness, tools like mindfulness, and even like mind-body fitness, like yoga and Tai Chi and meditation, to help ourselves and help the unconscious parts of our minds, and also just the more primitive parts of our body, including, like I would say, the stress response system, at least to some degree, move out of that state of fight or flight. And so mindfulness, again, in a nutshell, is a huge topic, and it has many both esoteric and practical meanings. But again, in a nutshell, I use mindfulness and awareness to lessen the gap between my symptoms and well-being. So what does this mean? It means that anytime I experience a symptom, I check in and reduce or remove the source of that symptom. This removes stress and allows my body to relax and heal. And along the same lines, like I was talking about, is you could try the Gupta Amygdala Retraining Program. It literally teaches you how to retrain your amygdala to eliminate one of potentially the main sources or causes of chronic fatigue. And like I said, I'm currently in this program, and I'm doing it as a review for chronic illness bloggers. I'm not being compensated. It's a fantastic program, so something to check out. So a couple of other things that worked for me are yoga, mind-body fitness. So yoga and other forms of mind-body fitness can keep your body in what's known as the relaxation response, which is the opposite of a stress response, which is what I was talking about earlier. This can literally help your body to reboot and help your nervous system to relax and heal. The relaxation response takes you deep into what's known as the parasympathetic state, which is the opposite of the sympathetic state, which is also known as the fight or flight response. In this state, your digestion returns. So let's say you're having trouble with IBS. Something to think about. It could be tied to the fact that you're in constant fight or flight. Digestion returns. Immunity goes up. Again, something to pay attention to. Immunity is really huge, especially if you're dealing with CFS or ME or other types of autoimmune conditions. Now, a lot of people will say, well, what is the exact cause of ME or CFS? The jury is still out. In my experience, I believe there can be many causes of it, but it can lead potentially to the same end state, which is being stuck in fight or flight. So to clarify, it could be a virus that began the journey for you, or some type of illness, or in my case, it was a ski accident. It could also be a divorce, some type of really, really stressful situation that's extremely stressful for your body. And then what happens is a potential theory is that one of the theories is that your body gets stuck in fight or flight. So now, of course, there are other factors to consider for other people, like genetic. We all have different circumstances, and so sometimes you have to again, be a health detective and piece together the pieces of the puzzle that are your story, because your story is going to be unique. Okay, so, but anyway, I just wanted to share that mind, body, fitness has been really helpful for me. So yoga can also affect and strengthen what is known as vagal tone, which is measured, as we understand it now, by heart rate variability. In a nutshell, the more variable your heart rate is, the healthier you are, and there's it's again a huge topic, but and I do discuss this much more in my book, The Memory of Health. And then you could also try something like Qigong, which is called energy cultivation. That's another way that it's known, and this is super mellow. So if you're really feeling like you don't have a lot of energy, you could try that. So again, deep nutrition is another tactic, and so what we eat has a profound impact on our health and well-being, and I really mean this. And especially if you're really sensitive, there's a certain portion of the population that they're known as an extra, like a highly sensitive personality. So it's sometimes I find that if you're extra sensitive, you're even more sensitive to foods. But we all have certain foods that we're inherently sensitive to, whether we're a highly sensitive personality or not. And so one of the other main things that I learned along the way was to look out for irritants. So now the irritants can be foods that you're sensitive to. They can also be, it could be environmental toxins, some type of synthetic chemical that your body is sensitive to, and I'm really sensitive to a lot of synthetic scents, actually, like perfumes, and I can't wear perfume, and I use like laundry detergent that is natural. And now, of course, the term natural is a whole other discussion, because that doesn't necessarily mean not synthetic, but we can't get into that here. But I would say that really look out for really feed your body well with deep nutrition, but also be aware of what you might be sensitive to and how that can be kind of chipping away at your energy levels and literally depleting your nutrients, because it's using up nutrients to kind of combat what you might be sensitive to. Does that make sense? So again, these are huge topics, but I just want to give you some of the highlights. And let's talk about brain fog for a second here. Again, a huge topic, but here are some of the situations that might lead to brain fog: lower oxygen levels, muscle tension, hormonal imbalance, low B vitamins, chronic inflammation, also what's known as an activated microglia. Did you know that your brain actually has an immune system? So if it gets activated, I believe you can experience some of the brain fog as well. So there are different things that cause brain fog. So one of the main things I believe that so some people will say it's muscle tension, and so and I think that is part of it. And hormonal imbalance is a big one as well. But also I believe that when your body is stuck in what's kind of like a chronic inflammatory state, which a lot of chronic conditions mean that you are already in a chronic inflammatory state. That's going to create inflammation. Inflammation can cause, guess what? Fatigue. So, and it can also cause pain, for that matter. So if you have fibromyalgia, it's what I did was in terms of in the course of writing my book and doing research, I found that I was able to connect the dots, and chronic inflammation is one of the main biomarkers in any chronic condition, and so it can impact conditions like CFS and MS and RA. And one of the ways that I experienced fatigue was through an activated immune system, which is, again, tied to chronic inflammation. So it may contribute to that feeling of brain fog, again, through the activation of the brain's immune cells, which are called the microglia. So, and on a final note, I just want to say that one of the most important things I think that anyone can do, this is why I encourage you to come join our support group on Facebook. is chronic fatigue support on Facebook is community. So, and again, kind of coming full circle back to mindfulness, my one main last wish for you, and even the first thing that you could do, even if you feel like you can't do anything else, is to seek community. Make it your first mindful act. We are social creatures, and we do need love and support in order to heal and thrive. And it also contributes greatly to what is known as resiliency. And there was a Harvard study done on how this is actually the main factor that keeps people well is being connected. So it's crucial. So, and chronic illness, as many of you know, can already be so isolating. It can isolate us even more, and of course we live in a very disconnected world at this point, and so find a way to get and stay connected, because your life, health, and well-being depend on it greatly. And again, so I wanted to thank you so much for listening. I just covered just a few topics today. There's much more. Let me run through the list again just to kind of do a summary for you. And again, if you want to read the blog post that's associated with this podcast, you can type in http://portlandwellnesscoach.com/energy, or if you're on the show page, just click on that pretty link. It'll take you right to the article or the blog that's associated with this podcast. And again, you can check out my book, The Memory of Health, for a much more detailed conversation as well as resources, and hopefully you can find, piece together again the pieces of your unique story. And so let me just run through the list really quickly. This is the whole list of things that worked for me, and I didn't go into everything here, but I didn't go into deep self-care, for instance, but I've learned to put myself first. That's really huge. But let me run through the list really quickly. These are some of the things that help me the most: mindfulness, yoga and mind-body fitness, deep nutrition, high-quality supplements, deep self-care, targeting brain fog, reducing irritants, chronic inflammation, kind of just being aware of chronic inflammation, how it may be a factor in fatigue, and community. And so hopefully that just gives you a little bit of an idea of what's worked for me, and you can read much more about what worked for me in my book, The Memory of Health, and come join us on Facebook. And it's called, again, it's called Chronic Fatigue Support. That's our main support page on Facebook. Again, make community your first mindful act. And I hope some of this information helped you today. I know there are so many topics here, and and I have a lot of guests on, and we do go into much more detail about a lot of these topics. But I just wanted to address some of the bigger ones and some of the bigger questions that I get asked all the time. So I hope this helped you today. Again, come join us on Facebook, Chronic Fatigue Support. It's pretty easy to find us. And you can also, again, read more about this topic. That's sort of reading the blog post that's associated with this podcast. Again, click on the link on the show page here. It's portlandwellnesscoach.com/energy. You can also type it in http://portlandwellnesscoach.com/energy. I hope some of this information has helped you. And I know there are so many ways that we could go deeper into these topics. And just my hope for you is that you begin to piece together the threads that are relevant for you. And I know it can be a challenging place to be when you have chronic fatigue or brain fog, or you're experiencing burnout, or if you're even experiencing a chronic condition like ME or CFS, or even some other type of chronic condition or autoimmune condition like RA or lupus or MS. And keep seeking information, keep asking the questions. Try not to get overwhelmed, though. That's probably one final tip I could give you is do your best to try to find a place where you feel a sense of peace, and try to keep your hope alive as well in this process. But never give up, because I do believe there are answers. So I hope this has helped you, and thank you so much for listening, everyone. And we'll see you on Facebook, hopefully, Chronic Fatigue Support. Take care. Bye-bye.